Hello everyone, and this time I will be offering my opinions and a quick analysis of the new things that have been released for Journey to Un'Goro, the next big expansion for Hearthstone, which is a huge deal because a ton of things will be implemented, cards will be lost, put into the Hall of Fame pack. This includes Azure Drake, Ragnaros, Sylvanas, and other such staples of many decks for pretty much the entire game's lifespan. And yeah, so let's get onto the analysis. First off, the quest cards. This is a new mechanic to Hearthstone where you essentially are given a quest at the start of the game. Now, if you run a quest card in your deck, it will always appear in your starting hand. This is a huge deal because it means that you can work on the quest from step 1, from turn 1 all the way up until turn 10, and every turn that you live. So the priest example that we've been given, it's 1 mana, Awaken the Makers, and the quest is to summon 7 Death Rattle minions, with the reward being you get an extremely powerful minion in return, with an extremely powerful battle cry. This minion being Amara, Warden of Hope. And the battle cry is set your hero's health to 40, and it's a 5 mana 8/8, and it has Taunt. So quite clearly this is so far above and beyond the power level of a traditional 5-drop that clearly this is a huge incentive to running this quest card, Awaken the Makers. Setting your health to 40 is, from the sounds of it, going to act as both a Reno effect. You know, you could be at 1 health and you play this card, improve your health total to 40, it essentially heals you for 39, potentially. But not only that, but it sets your max health to 40 as well. So if you take subsequent damage after setting your health to 40, you can then heal up with your priest hero power or other heal cards back up to 40, which is actually really interesting because for the longest time there's been this continuous argument, you know, why Blizzard aren't heroes' healths set to 40 as a standard. And honestly, I've never given that argument much truck. The game was designed to be 30 health heroes, and it takes a card as demanding as a quest card with its conditions to be completed for this to actually be possible. But boy, is it possible for Priest now, and I have no doubt that people will be experimenting with this card as soon as the expansion releases, because it's a fantastic build-around effect. You know, all you have to do is summon 7 Death Rattle minions. Therefore, what will you run? You'll probably run a Loot Hoarder. Pretty much every half-decent Death Rattle minion that you will consider running, just to improve the chance that you can trigger your quest and get Amara, Warden of Hope, as soon as possible in your hand. I have to imagine that when you've completed the quest, which this one is summon 7 Death Rattle minions, you will get Amara kind of directly placed into your hand. Now, other ways this could work, it hasn't been specified yet. It could either get shuffled into your deck, which I think is super unlikely, or it could get instantly played onto the battlefield, and the battle cry just naturally hits you. But I think that's a bit too powerful, and therefore it's probably just place Amara into your hand for you to later choose when you want to play it. Because let's face it, you probably do want to hold it back in the control games as a massive heal card. Ignoring the fact that it is a 5 mana 8/8 with Taunt, which is huge as a body, the battle cry could have greater value the longer you hold it. Therefore, I have pretty much given the most truck to it just being placed into your hand for you to choose when to play it. So, do I have any criticisms of this kind of mechanic? Honestly, not many. I feel like the conditional effects, how hard it is to complete the conditional requirement for the quest in order to get your reward, as well as how powerful the reward is itself, will determine how many decks post-expansion will run quest cards. So from the sounds of it, it looks like every class will get a quest card, and I'm sure that at least one of those quest cards, or at the very least the reward out of that quest card being completed, will be too weak or too conditional to be played. So if you have, say, a hunter quest which is heal yourself for, 15 health, I very much doubt that that will see any play. I mean, to be fair, it'd be kind of cool because it would encourage like a slower hunter deck. But traditionally, hunters do not specialize in healing. Therefore, they would not run that quest card. That's an extreme example. Naturally, hunters would not get a quest around healing. It would be pretty dumb. If anything, that would be Paladin, although it'd be really easy to do as Paladin, so I don't know. What sort of quests they might do in future, we can only guess at. So hunters, we can assume it's some kind of beast-related thing. For druid, it could be a beast-related thing, or maybe play so many big creatures, or ramp so much mana. Rogues could be draw so many cards, or play so many combo effects cards. You can really make any number of guesses, but based on the unique mechanics to each class, it would probably be related to that. Possibly Shaman will have a Murloc-related one, or Paladin will have a Murloc-related quest. I'm not too sure. But either way, it's a cool mechanic. It encourages building your deck around it because the reward seems to be super powerful, and I'm dead excited to see how powerful all the other rewards are for the other class quest cards. If all of them are at the power level of Amara, Warden of Hope, then we are in for a extremely swingy and powerful metagame. Probably quite control-orientated because these quest cards take time to complete, and therefore you're unlikely to play it as an aggro deck, unless the quest is something aggro-related, such as do so much damage to your opponent's face, or plays so many pirates. So yeah, it looks really cool. I'm very excited to see how many other classes and how many other classes get a quest card, what the quest requirements are, what the rewards are. There's a lot of things at play here. The requirement of the quest has to be doable for the class in question. So Priest fulfilling summon 7 Death Rattle minions, that should be quite possible. But maybe it ends up being a bit too difficult. But also, there's, the condition of how good is the reward, whether we'll see these quest cards see play. So, personally, I love the mechanic. It's very cool, very thematic. World of Warcraft, you're on a quest, you get some reward item at the end of it. Yeah, pretty awesome, pretty awesome. And so far, the community seems to be very on board with this kind of an idea. So, yeah. Good job, Blizzard. Seems good. The second mechanic that has been teased to us so far is the Adapt mechanic. So the card that was teased to us is a 5-mana 5/4 Beast Druid card, Verdant Longneck, with Battle Cry Adapt. And what Adapt does is it gives you a choice of 3 from a total pool of 10 buffs to the creature. So some examples that they give us: there's Crackling Shield, which gives that creature Divine Shield; Flaming Claws, which gives you +3 attack; Lightning Speed gives you Wind Fury, etc., etc. It's very similar to the Discover mechanic, and more specifically to Kazakus, because you choose from a range of 10 kind of options. You don't get like 2 options as Kazakus does with his potions and its different potion effects. But yeah, it seems powerful. However, this is the mechanic which I'm much less sure about, as there's a whole bunch of these kind of gains that you can get for your creature that could be very problematic. So the one I'm eyeballing at the moment as a potential issue in future is the Liquid Membrane buff from Adapt, which gives that creature the cannot be targeted by spells or hero powers effect, which hasn't been abusable in the past because such creatures have been typically very weak. So we can look at Spectral Knight, which I think saw an inclusion as a one-off back in the old days of Combo Druid, because it was a sticky minion because spells couldn't instantly kill it. Therefore, it was quite likely to either get traded into, in which case it's a pseudo board clear for you as the Druid player, or it would just be ignored and survive until the next turn for you to then combo into, with Savage Roar and the old Force of Nature. But simply because sometimes Liquid Membrane will be gotten by adapt creatures, I feel that some classes will just get shut down by that whenever that hits. Whenever the RNG favors a person with the adapt card, I feel like the rogue class will really suffer against any kind of adapt into Liquid Membrane, as they rely heavily on their removal from spells, Eviscerate, Backstab, all of those, Shadow Strike. They really rely heavily on that. They rely on casting spells as removal and then allowing their minions to just go face every turn and just build up tempo that way. So I feel that there's some effects here which will really screw up some of the classes. Also, the Crackling Shield, the Give Divine Shield kind of effect, that also could be problematic for some classes as well. Classes that rely on board control through trading minions, they will really suffer. Paladin, to some effect, will suffer against that effect. And yeah, it's a bit iffy, but overall I think it's cool, and it's thematically very strong because, you know, dinosaurs adapting, being mutated by the arcane powers and elemental powers and all that. It's definitely quite cool. And it does encourage some kind of decision-making, strong decision-making on the part of the player playing the adapt creature. So I think it's got potential to be annoying to play against if you're playing as rogue and your opponent as a druid plays, you know, Verdant Longneck for some reason. Personally, I don't think it's that too great of a card. And then they adapt it into Liquid Membrane, because then suddenly, even though it's got 4 health, you can't eviscerate it down as the rogue. And that's super annoying. Therefore, you end up trading, you know, your 4-drop straight into it. You've got no choice, you have to do that. Otherwise, you just surrender board control to the druid. Because they'll always have this 5/4, which is untargetable by your spells on the board. But yeah, overall, it's cool. Hopefully, it doesn't get abused too much. And I'm sure that they will have balanced this to some degree. You can see from the Verdant Longneck, a 5-mana 5/4 beast, even though it is a beast, it's not that well statted for a 5-drop. Adapt does help, but overall it's not a blowout card. So I think they are being very careful with this kind of mechanic. The flexibility combined with, you know, these kind of extra tags and decent stats could be a scary thing, but without decent stats, it should be fairly balanced. So, on to the rest of the update that we've been given. Well, there's a new tribe, apparently. They're adding the Elemental tribe. Pretty much any creature that looks kind of elementally fiery, icy, or otherwise. So, a lot of the Shaman cards, Ragnaros, even though that's rotating into the Hall of Fame, etc., etc. Ice Rager, of course. And with this comes another card teased, which is the Mage 2-mana 2/2 elemental card called Pyros. This is coming with the Death Rattle. Return this to your hand as a 6/6 that costs 6. And when that card dies, Pyros comes back to your hand as a 10/10 costing 10. So, is this card good or not? It's probably too weak. So again, going back to the rogue example, they can just backstab this and force you to kind of start again on the whole quest for board control type thing. I don't think it's hugely powerful, but at the same time, it does kind of work in a one-off deck because it kind of keeps your hand fairly full. But will one-off decks still be a thing with Reno rotating out? Probably not. Kazakus does still exist. Maybe that's good enough reason to play kind of control one-of mage. In which case, maybe this card is just about good enough to make the cut as a 2-mana play. Yeah, it's interesting. I do like that they're adding new kind of tribes into Hearthstone. It just kind of categorizes all of the creatures down a bit further, and it's a tribe that just makes sense, right? So, yeah, it's fairly cool. If you're wondering, Pyros will not actually continue coming back to your hand again and again, gaining +4 stats every time. He comes back to your hand twice. The first time is a 6-mana 6/6, the second time is a 10-mana 10/10. After that point, he will die. Or she, or it. I think it seems applicable here. So yeah, it's not like an endless value kind of a Nubrak kind of card. It's just a fairly high value card considering it's a 1-card slot in your deck. So yeah, personally I don't think this will be run in anything but a one-of deck, if those remain a thing, if Kazakhs is still strong enough to push that archetype. But again, with Bran rotating out as well as Reno, maybe one-of decks will just cease to be a thing, and Kazakhs will be no more. It's interesting. It's really interesting. So, what else was teased to us in the recent update? Well, there is the 5-mana Shaman card, Spell Volcano, which, as you imagine, is fairly destructive. It does 15 damage, randomly split, and it specifies among all minions. Overload 2. So this is essentially an infinitely worse elemental destruction, however with the potential to be amazing for you or terrible for you. It could wipe your board and then barely touch your opponent's, if you've both got some kind of board, or it could wipe your opponent's board and barely touch yours, theoretically. Some of the time that's bound to happen, but most of the time it will do some damage to your board and some damage to your opponent's. What does this mean? Well, it means that you might run this as just an extra AoE spell in a Control Shaman archetype deck, where you don't run that many minions pre-turn 5, or pre-turn 6 even, in which case maybe you would run this. It's a pseudo board clear, it doesn't run the risk of hitting you in the face for 15, as it can only hit minions, so yeah. But the fact that it can't hit face also means that you can't just run it as a extra smidge of burn and kind of hope that it hits the opponent's face a bit more than it does yours in an aggressive deck. So yeah, this will maybe see play as a one-off, I expect, in a control deck. We'll probably see some experimentation because it's just so cool, and the effect in-game looks pretty awesome, I've got to say. But overall, it doesn't seem hugely powerful. It's really cool though. It's, you know, it's again thematically super strong. It sets up what the expansion is, kind of primordial dinosaurs with volcano and all that good stuff. Adaptation, quests for loot, fantastic stuff overall. Yeah, so overall, the quest mechanic is the coolest thing by far, and I want to see what the other rewards and quest requirements are for the other classes. Adapt could potentially be bad, however, if they keep sticking the adapt battle cry onto weak static minions, which I'm guessing they will do in general to be safe with it, then it might be this expansion's version of Joust, which saw very little play overall, if we look at every single Joust card and how many of them got played. Pyros and the Elementals, they're cool. I'm not sure if it changes much, but it could be indicative of them adding elemental kind of tribal buff cards, so cards that either benefit themselves or benefit elemental cards already on the board in some way. Say you could have, if you have an elemental on the board, one of your cards in your hand gains plus something damage as a battle cry, or something else. So yeah, hopefully they mess around with the elemental archetype a little bit, similar to how they've done with demons and beasts, and Murlocs and Pirates and all those fancy fellas, and Volcano is merely okay. But the artwork and the effects in-game are pretty badass. So that's pretty much my thoughts on the information that we've been teased so far. Hopefully we see some more quest cards fairly soon, although I don't think many cards will be teased for a while at this point. So as always guys, thank you for watching. If you want to see more of this kind of analysis style and my thoughts on the expansions coming to Hearthstone, feel free to drop a sub and a like if you liked and you want to sub. And as always, I will see you, hopefully, in the next one.